I want to start as an introduction. I want to start with the handout, just the one-page handout. And this, we were thinking about this series, and this came across our desk in an email, and it so well fit in with what we were talking about. And this fellow, Jack Wilkie, he probably doesn't know me either, but evidently he's written a book, and it might be an interesting book. But he pictures fellowship in 3 stages: regular fellowship, spiritual fellowship, and personal spiritual fellowship. And he puts it kind of like a pyramid, just general fellowship. He'll put at the bottom level, and you get a lot of that. But then spiritual fellowship, you get less of it, and it's harder to come by. And then personal spiritual fellowship, and that's the pinnacle. And that's really the most needed. And as we've been thinking about this, we've come off of, this pandemic, and we went through, 6, 9, 12 months of isolation, which is good for pandemics, but it's not good for Christians, all right? We understand, and some people are still doing the isolation thing, and, if you have the other health problems that would make this worse, yeah, you can understand that. I'm not throwing any stones at anybody. But we need to have this personal, spiritual fellowship. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, when we first say fellowship, what first comes to mind? Food. Right? What do you want in your casserole, is kind of what comes to mind first. We're going to have a fellowship after services. Well, what does that mean? That means food, all right? When the Bible talks about fellowship, I don't think that's quite everything that they're talking about. And, that would be a part of it, I can't imagine, 15, 20 people getting together, not having food, that's beyond the realm of imagination, right? We like our food, all right? But that's not the end of it, all right? That's a small tip of it. And so he talks about, this idea of fellowship. And as we think about this, as we come off of this pandemic, after we come off of this isolation, I'm more and more convinced this is something we need to work at Oak Hill. This is something we really need this. And, we're seeing pockets of fellowship going on, and we may talk about those later. But for the general population of Oak Hill, we're not seeing it. 5 minutes before, even 15 minutes after on Sunday morning, and some people don't even get that. They come in after the service starts. They're gone as soon as you say amen. They may not even wait for that amen. And buddy, they are out of here. All right? What a fellowship are they getting? Now, when I was working at the school, Craig McDaniel was the president, and he would always tell a story. If you're walking along a country lane and you see a turtle sitting up there on the fence post, he didn't get there by himself. He had help getting there, okay? Now, more and more, I'm believing, when you and I get to heaven, we're going to be like that turtle on the fence post. We're not going to get there by ourselves. Other people have helped us get there. You think in your life, who's taken time to teach you? Who's taken time to take you in and give you spiritual nourishment? You didn't get to this place in your life accidentally. All right? In that same way, we need to start reaching out and helping others with their spiritual life. All right? Don't just leave it up to Michael or the elders or, whatever. It's somebody else's job. All right? Look at your life. Who can I mentor? Who can I just be with? And I'm more and more convinced that it's not a program that we can start. Let's start a program and organize it and get it done. This is going to have to be very fundamental and grassroots, where one person just starts talking to another. And as we've been in isolation, it's hard for us to do this, is it not? Man, let's meet for coffee. Man, let's meet for lunch. And it's all about spending time together. You think about the closest people that you love, your family, your best friend. How did they get to be your best friend? It wasn't an accident. You spent time together. Is that correct? Just kind of nod every now and then. You spent time together. Well, if all I see of my church family is sitting in here for 55 minutes a week, not even staying the whole hour, how close am I going to be to my church family? And I'm more and more convinced, man, we've got to do something. And I agonize over, kids that have grown up in the church and they just don't care about church now. And, people, and I know people that I love. Why are they not still in the church? If they go through Jam Junction, they've been all the way through the Bible. They have learned every story. But somehow, that switch didn't get turned on from their father and mother's faith to their faith. You don't inherit faith, do you? You have to have your own faith. And somehow, that switch didn't get turned on. They've heard all the stories. They know all the stuff. If you go to talk to them, they're going to know every verse you're going to say. They've heard it before. We're great at teaching facts, but it's about the connections. And I'm going to be real blunt tonight. We've lost people because they don't have a connection. They know the facts, but they don't have the connection. And this is the way to get the connection. And so I'm thinking this is so important to the church. And you know stories. You don't need me to tell you 5 people that you can probably name 5 people yourself that are not here, that should be here, simply because they don't have a connection. Nobody was their friend. Nobody reached out. And I'm just as guilty, on Sunday morning when my grandkids are here, who do I want to talk to? I want to talk to my grandkids. I want to talk to people that I love, and I haven't got to see them for a long time. But what I should be doing is what? Finding that person that's sitting alone and sit with them. Finding that person that doesn't have somebody and go talk to them. Try to spend some time with them. I should be reaching out and try to make a connection. Those connections don't just happen. We have to make them happen. And we have to have that conversation. I'm just trying to enlarge the circle of my friends, And when I was at working, I spent 20 years at Georgia Northwestern Technical College. I had a lot of acquaintances, but I didn't have a lot of friends. And you understand the difference, right? I was friendly to a lot of people. But if I needed help in the middle of the night, I wasn't going to call an acquaintance. I'd call a friend. Well, now, I don't even have that. I don't even have acquaintances. I'm retired. What do? How do I meet people? And so, that's something that I've had to deal with. When you stop working, you don't have any contact with those people. What's going to happen to even that relationship, that association relationship that you once had when you're working? Well, it's going to go away. All right? I could go back to the school now, and there might be half the people there that were there when I was there. Half of them wouldn't even know who I was. And the ones that were there, well, it's good to see you. You need to leave now. You're last year's news, something like that. So we've got to work on this, and it requires effort, and it's not easy. If you are introverted like I am, and you think it's crazy for a teacher to be introverted, 3/4 of the reviews or the resumes we got for preachers in the past, the preachers described themselves as introverted. Does that sound crazy? I don't know why that is. Most of the time you spend alone in the office, I guess. So, if you got an introverted guy and he's acting extroverted, what does that mean? Man, he's really working at it. He's exhausted. That takes a lot more energy for that introverted guy to act extroverted for an hour or two. And so, yeah, that's a thing. During the quarantine, I'm happy as a clam. I could be a hermit real easily. I got the internet. I got things to do. I volunteer online. I'm happy as a clam. Is that what the Lord wants me to do? Well, no, unfortunately. The Lord wants me to reach out. The Lord didn't ask my opinion on that. All right? And so it's a struggle. And, some of you may have that same struggle. Now, I've seen people, buddy, they get in a crowded room of strangers. They light up, and buddy, they have to shake everybody's hand, and they're in their element, That's like the worst thing in the world. I would never want to do that, So, and that's just different people. I'll take time with somebody. Let's have a cup of coffee. Let's go someplace where we can talk. I love that. A quiet thing. So, and anyway, it's going to take time together, and that's what the article's about. And notice about 3/4 of the way down, and the second paragraph in fellowship. If all we're doing is before service and after service, what's he say about it? This essentially guarantees true closeness will never happen. An intentional dedication to fellowship and a decision to proactively pursue it rather than waiting for the church to schedule an opportunity for it is what it's going to take to break through with each other. Don't wait for somebody to invite you. You take the first step. And I know it's hard. It's awfully hard. Fellowship is a broad term for spending time together. We need to not just talk about the weather, talk about sports. You can go to the Kiwanis Club and do that. All right? You can join the photography club and talk about the weather and inane things that are not important. All right? We're a spiritual family. What's he say? Start talking about spiritual things. Start talking about eternal things. What have you been studying lately? What have you learned from the Bible lately? All right? You can't go back to the 5th grade. That's why I said lately, talk about the contents of the sermon, not about how you don't like the preacher. You don't have fried preacher for lunch. You reheat the sermon, not the preacher. When we get together with other Christians even, what do we talk about? Are we talking about spiritual things? All right? If you don't talk about it, what does that say? That's not important. All right? And, what's important? Betty, we'll talk about sports all day long. We'll talk about the weather, but nobody does anything about it, right? What are you going to do about it, right? But then even the last thing, personal spiritual fellowship, the most difficult. How's your walk going? How can I pray for you? And then follow it up with prayer. Talking about what's really important. You think about 5 minutes after you've died. What's going to be important then? It's not going to be anything at the house. It's not going to be sports. That's not going to be important 5 minutes after you've died. What's going to be important when you're standing before the Lord? That's eternal things. All right? And, there's a balance. I'm sure that, there's a time to be happy and a time to be sad. There's a time to laugh and a time to cry. And there's a balance there. And I'm sure, Jesus was not morose all the time. I'm sure there were times where he was smiling. And if you haven't seen The Chosen, take some time and watch that thing. They've just done an amazing job. And they show Jesus smiling sometimes, And there's times when he's serious. But he was pleasant to be around. People flocked just to be around him. Why? They liked him. All right? Not everybody, of course, when you start interfering with their power. And we talked about that in our Bible classes last year. You can always do the right thing and always tell the truth, and some people are still not going to like you. And, should we be surprised when somebody doesn't like us? Well, no. Anyway, that's really where we're going. How do you do fellowship? And that's, I know I spent too long on that. That's kind of an introduction. And Michael put in red letters, if you don't have one of these, Michael put in red letters, and I left it in red. Class presentations may vary and or deviate from this book at the teacher's discretion. Well, the teacher disgressed. I really think that's important, and it really kind of set the stage for where I want to go with this. We actually started this, if you remember, last year before the corona hit in the springtime, and we got about 2 lessons into it, and we went into isolation. And so this was such good material, Brother Lucian says, listen, we need to get that back out because people weren't able to hear it. We finished the last few sessions on Zoom with about 8 or 10. So some of you have been through this, but hopefully this will bring this back out again and you can get more out of it. So you think about, and now I need my clicker. There we go. Fellowship, essential for growth. That one's Michael's. Here we go. This is the one I had. And this is from your outline from the big book. And you should have been given. Anybody need one of these? If you don't have one, this is what will be. Doug? What? Oh, we ran out. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody can have this one, actually. Michael, you mind taking this back? Harold Boyd needs one. Oh, Harold, Herons need one? Okay, I'm sorry. Well, that's a good problem to have. All right. So if you got the book, this is on page 2, The Problem of Self-Centeredness. And we become self-centered, do we not? We get focused on me. And, how does this affect me? When a situation comes up, what's your first reaction? Say, oh man, I'm sorry that happened to you. Or is it, how does this affect me? And man, I have seen that. Well, it doesn't affect me, so it's not bad. And that's where empathy comes in. If we don't know our brothers and sisters enough to know what they're going through, what problems are they having? When they come up and they're sick, all right, how do we feel about it? Man, bummer, whatever. Or if you really know them, you say, man, who's going to feed their dog? Practical things. What about their kids? All these things. And you start thinking of ways you can help them during this time. All right? And we start reaching out. And that's Christianity. Getting together for an hour a week and trading facts about the Bible is not Christianity. And that was in that article. That's not original. I can't come up with anything like that. We're great at teaching facts, but somehow we need to turn that light bulb on and get past the facts and into the heart. And one of the things we're talking about for our theme next year is the verse in Hebrews that says these letters are going to be instilled into your heart and mind. And you're going to hear a lot about that, Lord willing, next year. Because, these epistles, they need to be on your brain, but they also need to be on your heart. Carrying these things out in your heart. It's not enough to just know about something, but the heart has to be involved. And so, that's just something I've been thinking about. It's not in the outline. I'll just throw it in for free. The head and the heart have to go together. All right, so how does a local congregation, how do we start relating to one another? How do we get to know one another? Do you know the people around you? Do you know their names? And I'll admit, I'm awful with names. I can hardly remember my own name half the time. I'll say, who's that guy? And I'll describe him, and Angie can kind of put the pieces together enough to help me with the name. I'm kind of like the guy I had heard really last week. There was two older couples, and the men were walking behind the women, and something came up about a restaurant. And the guy was talking to the other guy, and he was trying to remember the name of that restaurant. And so he asked the fellow, he says, what's the name of that flower that you might give to your girlfriend, and it's red? And the guy says, a rose? And he says, that's it. Hey, Rose, what was the name of that restaurant we went to the other day? I'm not quite that bad. But I'm nearly that bad. I can remember Angie's name, but that's about it. Do we know the people around us? If we have an announcement, do we even know who it is? The people that we've mentioned tonight. Do we know who they are? Do we remember them when we pray? And I'm becoming more convicted that I need to start a prayer list and peek when I pray. I learned that from Jerry Barber many years ago. You can peek when you pray. You were taught as a kid, don't open your eyes. But, what if I'm naming these people by name and I'm using their names when I pray? Isn't that much better? And I'm convicting myself, I know. Several years ago, some churches allowed themselves to be analyzed. They said a majority of the people knew a very small percentage of the people. Those that gathered together for worship were mostly an anonymous group of worshipers. They didn't want to get involved. You see people like that? And, you talk to them on the street, I don't want to be involved. Whatever you're talking, I don't want any part of it. Well, that's kind of carried over into church, has it not? I want to give the minimum. What's the least I can do? And you really get that attitude. You start talking about teaching a Bible class. You start talking about, these things that we expect to be done, but we don't want to do them. Somebody does them. That nameless, some other guy. Well, who's doing that? I can do that, They expressed little interest in becoming more involved in each other's lives. They only came to worship for the sake of their own spiritual life and personal salvation. When people leave and they say, I didn't get anything out of it, one reply is, well, we weren't worshiping you. But it's really sad when people say that because they think it's all about me. It's like I come out of a movie theater. I don't want to be involved with the people there. I'm just going there for the movie. I'm going there for the show. All right? Is church like that? I'm just going for the show? What can I get out of it? Well, it didn't really do much for me. How much did you put into it? Is the next question. They go to church as they would the movie theater. The bottom line, churches that were analyzed consisted of members who were self-centered. Very little fellowship taking place. And the 1970s was called the Me Decade. And I don't think it ever went away, really. I'm the center of the universe. My mom and dad, they treated me as the center of their universe. And when I leave, I'm still the center of the universe. Everything revolves around me. How does this affect me? Looking out for number one, increased use of drugs and alcohol as a way of escape, rapid crime increase. What's on the rise? Transcendental meditation. Is meditation good? Yeah. Do you want to do it for 20 hours a week? Well, you may want to rethink that, I believe, that's where you take scripture in and you meditate on that. You ruminate on that. And that can happen, whether you're driving or whatever you're doing. What are you thinking about? Using that time. The greed decade. We're very mobile. We can go to Illinois in a day, where it used to be it would take weeks and weeks, to get there. Now you just go in a day. Families come in and they go out, and nobody bothers to get to know them. All right. When somebody comes in here, do we surround them with love? Do we try to make that connection? I think really Oak Hill is very good about that. You see, I love it when somebody comes forward and somebody comes with them, just because the front bench is very lonely. Um, and I love it when a family moves in and I see people going up to meet them, all right? And that's what we should be doing. We should be starting to make those connections. Oh, you got a kid in high school. I got a kid in high school. You got, this connection. So we live in a highly mobile society. Technology that was supposed to bring us closer together can actually keep us apart. Now think about that. You get on Facebook, what do you see? You don't see somebody's messy house like your messy house. You see it after they've remodeled the kitchen and everything's new. Then you see their kitchen. All right? Boy, I've got an old kitchen. I need to remodel. You see all these TV shows. Everything's all new. Man, my house is, old. I need a new house before I can have somebody in. Let me tell you about the Vick family growing up. We had 3 boys in our family. Never had a clean house as far as looking back on it. Angie can probably affirm that. Even when she was there, she'd be the guest. She'd probably looking around and say, man, this place, But we had people come to our house. And years later, I was talking with a lady online that had made a connection. She says, we would stand around after church looking hungry, so your mom would invite us over for lunch. And she did that, the Lefflers, I remember even their name. But we've got old movies that I've recently converted to digital format from Super 8, and it just shows people sitting around their kitchen table. And that was the most common thing. Now my dad, if we had people over on Sunday night or Wednesday night, he'd have to go to work the next day, and there'd still be people there. He would start turning off lights to get them to go home. Why? They wanted that connection. They were starving for that. And, even today, when something comes up about my mom, there'll be people that chime in and say, your mom saved my life. Just wanting that connection. And, we'd have coffee and something, nothing fancy. But people loved it. They loved the fellowship. And I think we're really lacking. We're hurting ourselves when we don't have that. And so, on Facebook, you're going to see the best face on everybody. They're all dressed up. They're, got their new whatever. And my life's not like that. So I must not be measuring up. And we're discontent. And, even though we can talk to 1,000 people, I don't want to talk to anybody because they're all looking down at me. And we're feeling more lonely and more isolated than ever before. And, why is that? Has anybody ever contacted you and said, man, I need to be with somebody and I don't have anybody to be my friend? Well, and you say, no, I don't want to do that. Well, we're not going to turn anybody down, are we? You want to get together, we'll get together. And here's the thing. Number one, we're too proud to ask for help. And I see that so often. Even when we really need help, we don't ask for help. All right, but number two, we need to see other people and make the first move for them because they're uncomfortable asking for help. And sometimes people in the church, they're the worst ones to help. They'll fight you to not be helped. Why is that? When I help you, you get the blessing of receiving, and I get the blessing of helping. That's 2 blessings that get to happen because you accepted help. And you have to convince people of that sometimes. I don't know why that's a hard thing. And it has to be pride. I can't think of anything else. You might have a better reason. But we don't even want to accept help. We don't even want to think about asking for help. That's like awful. I don't know why that is. If you're in need, man, I'm lonely. I want to talk to somebody. Reach out. Man, let's spend some time together. All right, last thing. What are we doing on time? It's probably all the time's all gone, and I hadn't made it to the first scripture. I've just been ranting up here. I'm sorry. All right, 1 Peter 4:9 is there. The church fellowship free from self-centeredness. Get yourself out of the center of your life. And that's so hard. I know. 1 Peter 4:9, show hospitality to one another without grumbling. That's a command, people. It's not a suggestion. It's not you really ought to do this. This is a command. Is that less of a command than don't steal? Oh, Ron Vick was caught stealing. He must be the worst guy in the world. What if I didn't show fellowship? Well, that's all right. Is that in the same category? It's a command. I don't know. You tell me. All right? We are to have care for one another. 1 Corinthians 12:26. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. If you don't know somebody, do you even care if they're sick? If they get honored, hey, they got Employee of the Month, do you even know where they work? Are you happy with them? How can you be happy with somebody you don't even know? That's the idea. And all of these we can go through, and it's the same thing. James 5:6, confess your sins one to another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. When was the last time you confessed your faults to somebody else? Think about it. Do we have to come forward on Sunday morning to confess our faults? We do not. And usually, what's the rule of thumb? You should confess to the extent that even people know about it. If the whole town saw me drunk on Saturday night, I need to confess in front of the whole town. But if I've insulted Michael, I don't need to come forward on Sunday morning. I need to go to Michael and apologize to him. All right? You see how that works? Confess your faults. But what's he say? The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. We're praying for one another. I covet your prayers. I want you to pray for me. And I want to be able to pray for you. And I don't do that like I should. That's why I need to start my prayer list. I need to be better at it. These generic prayers, blanket prayers, is that the same? I don't think it is. Teach and admonish one another. Colossians 3:16, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts. You can use that verse at times when you're not talking about instrumental music. I know that's a stretch for some people. What's he say? Teaching and admonishing one another. When we sing, guess what we're doing? We're teaching and admonishing. But when was the last time you admonished somebody? Talking to them. When is we talk about reprove, rebuke, and exhort. We're all about exhorting. Don't you go rebuking me, though. All right? Now, I don't like it when you go rebuking me. When was the last time we rebuked anybody? We're not big on rebuking, are we? All right? Serving one another, Galatians 5:13. You are called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. You know, when I help my wife out, I should be doing it because I love her, and not because I feel obligated, not because I need the brownie points, which I always do. Whatever other ulterior motive, I should be doing it out of love. And guess what? I should be doing that for everybody. Today I took a fella to the doctor, and he says, how much do I owe you? And, man, I am glad I was able to help. All right. Do we feel obligated to pay a brother for a service? That's just something to think about. The early church, and we read at the beginning, Acts 2:42 through 47, we referred to it. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, the fellowship, the breaking of the bread, and prayers. All right, those four things. Teaching, there's the second thing, fellowship. We're real big on the teaching part. We have a Sunday that we don't have the Lord's Supper. We're going to have a rebellion. I remember one Sunday night at the West Rome congregation, we didn't have the Lord's Supper. And you'd thought, it was the worst sin ever, to not offer the Lord's Supper. Well, it was kind of a weird thing. It was like a missionary was there or something, and it was an unusual service, and we didn't have it. Wow. That's just not right. Right there with breaking bread is fellowship. Do we feel that strongly about fellowship? It's just kind of, we'll skip that part and go to the part we're interested in. All right? Teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayers. And awe came upon every soul. Many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles, and all who believed were together and had all things in common. They were selling their possessions and belongings, distributing to all as any had need, and day by day attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes. They received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. Now look at the result of this. The Lord added to their number day by day those who are being saved. I really believe if we would do what they did, we'd get the results that they got. Think about that. The church in Antioch. Now, those days, prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. One of them was named Agabus, stood up, foretold by the Spirit that there would be a great famine over all the world. This took place in the days of Claudius. So the disciples determined, everyone according to his ability, to hoard food. Is that what it said? We need to hoard food because there's coming a famine. No, they said, we need to send relief to the brothers living in Judea. And they did so, sending it to the elders by the hand of Barnabas and Saul. So they didn't think about themselves first. They thought about the people that were worse off than they were. I never did hear that second bell. That means we get to keep going, right? All right, we'll have to stop there. The church in Macedonia, they did it. The church in Achaia, they did it as well. And Lord willing, we will start there next week. And keep these things in mind. Read through these. You've got the books. You kind of know where we're going with it. And you may think of other things that need to go along with it.